Unfortunately, Remco could not make it today, so Marcel Bielefeld, his colleague, has graciously accepted the invitation to take over and give this presentation on Remco's behalf. Marcel, the floor is all yours.
Good. Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon, depends on where you're living in. Here in Europe, we are at almost 6 o'clock in the afternoon or evening, if you like. So thank you very much. On behalf also of Remco, my colleague Remco Offenberg, I will present this contribution to It's Money. And the topic we shall like to share with you is that the innovative reuse of existing structures and especially unsustainable solution to the Dutch housing crisis. The topics I like to share with you is explanation about that housing crisis in the Netherlands and what it brings as building challenges. One of the solutions can be transformation of existing structures and change them to housing or condos, but it has effects on the foundations. And that means that there's a new role for the foundation engineer, including new skills and maybe also new tools for the foundation engineer. And bring us back to the topic, how increased testing can contribute to the housing crisis we have in the Netherlands. But first, this housing crisis is already going on for a while in the Netherlands. At the moment, it's quite difficult to find a place to live. A house or a condo is expensive and difficult. There's a shortage in homes, which is almost 400,000 at the moment, and it's increasing rapidly. Only a year ago, or slightly more than a year ago, the number of shortages was just 300,000. And up to 2030, the expected shortage will grow rapidly to almost 1 million homes. There are several reasons for that shortage. I'll come to that later. But that is the problem we have in here. And for maybe you're not all aware of the Netherlands, but it's a tiny country in the Netherlands, in Europe, a small country if you like. I've compared here some demographic numbers. On the left side, the Netherlands, you see the small country lines there. I'm not quite sure it's the proper scale compared to the United States on the right side, but roughly the United States is 250 times the square area of the Netherlands, but there's only living 20 times more people than in the Netherlands. So the average inhabitants per square kilometer or square mile is 12 more dense populated. The Netherlands is 12 times more dense populated than this in the United States. To illustrate that, the blue, that is on scale comparable. That is the blue area, that's the United States, and the tiny block in blue is the Netherlands. Well, Netherlands is even smaller than the smallest states of the United States, West Virginia. But if you look at the population in the States, are roughly 330 million people compared to the 17.8 million we having here in the Netherlands. And so the yellow box will fit easily, more or less, in the blue box in the States, but it won't fit, the yellow box won't fit in the blue box for the Netherlands. And that's the problem of the housing crisis which is going on in the Netherlands. And that housing crisis has severe issues in society. Of course, the house price will increase and makes it almost impossible for youngsters to buy their first house or even to rent a first house because it's just not available. Has this impact on social housing, housing for disabled peoples, and those which are the hardest, have the hardest effect on are single individuals. The houses they need for a single household are just not available. Makes it difficult for students, even more difficult for students. And of course, there's always the risk of homelessness when homes are not available. So it's not only related to a particular area. If you see the map on the right side, the darker the color, the more the shortage is. You see it is in the major cities, Amsterdam, The Hague, Utrecht, Rotterdam, but it's also especially in cities with universities where students are living. For instance, the red spot on the northern part of the Netherlands, So it's all over the Netherlands. There's a shortage of homes, and it will not improve over time. There've done many predictions by the government how the shortage will develop in time, and well, let's say up to 2028, there's no real improvement. And even if you look at the picture on the right, even in 2030, it's predicted there is still a shortage of 300,000 homes. And it's not that easy to reduce that shortage, because there's a limitation. In fact, there are three limitations. That's the building and construction capacity. Let's say the contractors, the engineers, everything what's required for building homes. Secondly, there's a lack of money, or especially investors, and especially the housing associations who want to invest in houses, because older investments seems to be more attractive for them. And a third, and maybe that's the most important or most severe problem, there's just not areas, there's just not land to build on. We are a small country, so there is not much land, and some of the land has limitations to build on because of environmental impact. The amount of PFAS or NOx is just too high for housing and building homes on. So that all together gives the problem of the housing crisis, which is in fact just a demand and supply problem. We have, the graphs are borrowed from the Dutch government, and they're therefore in Dutch. But on the left side, we see that there are roughly 8.3 households in the Netherlands, but there are only 7.7 million houses available. And if there's a shortage in supply, then the price will rise. That shortage is mainly because the rise in the number of households has increased rapidly last years. It has to do with immigration from the northern part of Africa, but also due to the Russians' invasion in Ukraine. Many people find Europe, and especially the Netherlands, as a nice place to stay and to live. We have a huge amount of international students studying on the Dutch universities, and preferable having a simple home, but because they are supported by their governments or by their families, they can afford a slightly more expensive housings than the national students. Next to that the households, there are more households because the number of people per household are increasing rapidly, or decreasing, asking for more homes. And the last, but certainly not the least, that elderly people are living longer in their home, keeping a huge house for just one or two people living there. There are no elderly homes or limited elderly homes in the Netherlands. It has been promoted over a while that elderly people will living independent in their homes. But then at the moment, because of the shortage, that is one of the reasons there is a shortage in housing. Solution is simple: build more houses. That's simple. More than 1 million houses are required up to 2030, and even more will be expected because the growth of the inhabitants in Netherlands is still growing more in the upcoming years. Building more homes seems to be simple. This is also from the government of the Netherlands, because some of the houses are so old or have poor quality, they have to demolish. You see those in the red box on the right side. So roughly 89,000 houses will be removed. And to compensate that, we need 1.3 million new houses, the green boxes. And those green boxes indicates on the left side, building new houses. In the middle, split bigger houses to smaller houses. Example, in an ordinary house, we can divide it in 2 or maybe 3 homes for elderly people. And on the right side, the transformation of buildings to new condos, new homes. And again, 1.3 million, building 1.3 million of houses is quite an extensive job. And there's just not the capacity of building all those houses as in new houses. So therefore it's important that transformation of existing buildings contributes to the number of houses which is built in the upcoming years. And with transformation, it's meant that it's the reuse of existing buildings. That can be because the function is changed, for instance, from a storage or from an office, to make houses or condos in that. It can be because of old buildings are upgraded, make them energy neutral by having isolation, or combining houses, two small houses which has been built 100 years ago, not fulfilling the requirements of modern houses, but combining them to one house can make them, can bring them a new life and bring it a new home for a new household. And which is quite popular at the moment, adding new layers on top of existing buildings. Top up is, I think, the proper English word. In Dutch, we call it optoppen. And that optoppen is even a national program for that, for top up buildings. It means building new layers of condos on top of existing buildings. Something like this project here, where we see an existing buildings in 4 layers on the left side, slightly more the right side, and an additional layer has been added on top of it for additional square meters. In this picture, you see even 3 of those black or dark colored top-up and extra layers on roofs of existing buildings. But there are other examples as well. This one is in Rotterdam, where there has been a shopping mall from the 1948. And on top of that, additional a 70-meter high-rise building. Well, it's the Netherlands, so 70 meter, we think that is high-rise. So 70-meter high-rise building giving place for 114 condos and some parking lots, which is built on top of the existing structure from 1948. Other examples, they're not necessarily a building. Here's a crane at an old wharf constructed in 1952 in Amsterdam, the north part of Amsterdam. And on top of this foundation, which is still there, they topped it up with 3 levels, in this case, is offices. Smaller projects, just some additional senior houses on top of existing apartments, just an extra level on top of the roof. And this is an interesting project as well. This is from 1942, an old building from Philips. The most likely light bulbs has been produced and stored here in this building. The building itself is not very suitable for having housing in it because of the windows and the construction type, but the roof is quite well suitable for adding additional layers. So that has been constructed. You see on the left side the 3 layers of houses on top of this building. And on the right side, we're walking on the old roof, which has been a roof, but is nowadays a sort of area where all those new houses on top of the old roof are situated. Maybe not all top-up solutions are nice, but it's not to me to judge. I'm not an architect. It's just that it is a possibility to help the Dutch housing crisis. However, if you change the function of a building or you top up, there's always that uncertainty about the existing structure. Is it solid and sound enough to build and to make it part of a new structure? That's not only for, let's say, the concrete or the steel of the structural elements, but it's also valid for our foundations. And so we need to understand and manage uncertainties and transform them to opportunities. That's also valid for our foundations. Because if we do some top up and we add some layers on top of our buildings, then we get a change in loads on those foundations. And basically there are 3 things which are needed from us as engineers, is that we have a closer look at the bearing capacity of those existing foundations. Is it suitable to bear the new loads? What's the quality of those foundations? Is it still sound and good enough to fulfill the requirements at that moment and in the future? And there's always the question if the old foundation, the original foundation, is there built as it was designed. Because the loads will change. On the left side, the original building where during the design process, the foundation has been such designed that the resistance R is just more than the weight of the building weight, including all partial factors and whatever type of method you use for your structural analysis. And if you top that up and you add modules with an additional weight on top of it, an additional layer, then of course the loads will increase on your piles. And the question is, do you need adjustments to your foundation, or is there just a hidden safety in that foundation which can be activated? And that's what I like to focus on if we have a look at the testing of existing foundations, because there is hidden safety. During the design process, the safety factors take into account all uncertainties in the design, how accurate has been the SPT or the CPT, how good has been the design methods, and did the soil characterization and the parameters you've chosen in the design, were they correct or incorrect? So the design methods incorporate uncertainty, and that has been affected by factors of safety. But now the foundation is there and the piles are there. And Mohammed said as well, if you test, you know. So if you can test and you can prove there are more loads can be accepted on these piles, that will be a great help to adding additional layers on top of it. So we're looking for hidden safety in existing foundations to activate them, and therefore increased loads can be accepted. But next to that, it's also, if it can bear the load, it's also necessary that the foundation, the existing foundation, is sound and solid. Is it fit for purpose, not only now, but also in the upcoming future, the future which can easily be more than the original design period. And in case the loads are just too high, maybe there are some additional foundation elements needed to improve the existing foundation, make it suitable for the new functions. And it means that the foundation engineers get a different role in this all, because instead of designing new foundations, the loads come from structural engineer. We get the information from the soil by SPTs or CPTs, and in the end, a new foundation has to be designed. That will be a different role if we have to reuse that existing foundations, because then we have to inspect and we have to test those foundations and assess and adjust when necessary those foundations. So the role of the foundation engineer will change from designing to more inspecting and testing. How to detect if an existing foundation is fit for purpose? Well, most important information is in archives. Well, if those are available, those archives are sometimes available in the archives of contractors, owners, or even on the city council. But those archives enclose a lot of information about the design, the calculations, and maybe even the installation logs. However, inspection is needed to assess the situation as is, just to check if the situation as built is the same as it was designed for. And with this information from the archives and the inspection, a redesign or re-evaluation of the foundation has to be made. What's the bearing capacity of the existing piles, and are they suitable for the extra loads or the change in loads after transformation? Sometimes it's simple. There are all telltales for dysfunctioning. For instance, here some buildings, well, these are some older buildings, maybe you recognize on the right side the characteristic facades of some old buildings in Amsterdam. And if there are settlements, differential settlements, or there are cracks in the facades, or the floor is not equal anymore, there are good telltales for a dysfunctioning foundation. However, if those telltales are not there, when they're lacking, there's no proof that the foundation is sound. So there are telltales for telling us for a dysfunctioning of the foundation, but there are no telltales for a proper functioning of it. So that means that more effort has to be done to check and control the existing foundations. That can be done, as I told, by checking the archives, just check the original designer, how he did their calculations. But it's much better to design it again with new soil investigation, use modern methods, use software, and use the experience over the last years to redesign the existing foundation. Validate the design by performing load tests is then to make sure that you prove that all the assumptions in the design are correct. Like Mohammed said before, performing the load test is done on new piles, but it's also valid for existing older or old piles. Those load tests gives us more information to check the assumption in design, because in general designs are conservative. They're on the safe side. Our factor of safety is generally higher than what in reality is required. So testing will lead that the design factors can be changed, and therefore that the hidden safety in the structure and in the foundation can be activated. Load testing can be done in several ways. It can be statically, stat rapid, or dynamically. It's been shown by both David and Mohammed. And in the end, the reason for testing is a load settlement diagram or a load movement diagram, as David called it, with horizontal axis the load on top of the pile, and vertical the settlement or the movement of the pile. And in fact, there are two important numbers. That's the ultimate load compared to the working load, gives us information about the factor of safety or factor of uncertainty, in fact, and the settlements or the movement at working load, which gives us information about the serviceability. And that's what we need if we need to design in all situations, either a new foundation or an old foundation. And this is how it looks like in practice here. There is an existing building, existing foundation, and the load tests are done under the building. The building is just in use, and during use, the static load test in this case has been performed under the foundation. You see some pictures here of the setup, a jack pushing the pile downward using the upper structure as a counterweight, and in the same time a measuring system for measuring displacements. It's always the life of a testing engineer is not always that simple. Sometimes the holes are quite small to perform the work, but in the end we need to be near the piles under the existing foundation. So the load test gives important information, the load settlement, the load movement diagram that confirmed original design and the construction method and the assumptions that has been made. With that we can optimize new design, also the new design for the new structure after the transformation, to check and to confirm that the foundation is fit for purpose, reduce uncertainties, and to activate hidden safety. And to our experience all over the years we do this type of tests, is that the load test shows in almost all cases higher allowable loads than one could expect based on the original designs. It's not a question of reducing the safety, that's something else. We just make an optimal use of the hidden safety in the existing foundations. And load testing will help us for discovering that hidden safety. A simple example here of a street which has been originally constructed in 1902 is in Amsterdam. You see typical facades of this area in Amsterdam. And the question is quite simple: can the owners of these buildings, can they add an additional layer on top of this construction? I'm not an architect, so I have not an opinion about if it's suitable or not. I'm just an engineer who's asked, are we able to put a construction on top of the roof, op top? And then, yes, then you have to do inspection and testing, because you have to know exactly what's underneath. The archives give some information, but that's not enough. You want to make sure that the foundation is there as it is built, that we want to make sure how the condition of the piles are. In this occasion, there were even timber piles, so there's always a risk of dry rot, but steel piles can corrode, can have corrosion, and concrete piles have carbonization. So there's all reason to inspect existing foundation piles and some non-destructive testing has been done here, and to detect the amount of dry rot, because still some degradation is acceptable. It's not if there's any degradation, it's just the question, are these piles fit for purpose? And in this occasion, a static load test has been done, where you see the load settlement diagram on the right side. The conclusion in this occasion was, yes, with the additional layer on top of it, the higher loads can be bared by these piles. The static load test proved that there was more capacity than was expected based on the original design drawings, calculations, and the condition of the piles were good enough. They were fit for purpose. So in this case, we're able to use the hidden safety for adding an extra building layer on top of it. It had to be a lightweight, therefore the loads were increased just below 10%. Brings me to a resume about the housing crisis in the Netherlands. It's affecting the society because that is it now, and it will for a while, because there's just a limitation in the capacity what we can build here in the Netherlands. And the engineers are the key to solutions. It's on our shoulders to make sure that there become innovative solutions to deal with this housing shortage problem in a cost-effective way. And the transformation of existing structures will add significantly to the housing inventory and within reasonable costs. And that means that for foundation engineers, our role will slightly change. That not only the foundation engineers, but also structural engineers slightly change in time. What will change? Instead of designing new, we have to check more and more existing foundations to see if they're fit for purpose and that they were able to bury the new loads. That also means that the toolbox of the testing engineers will change over time, where inspection and testing will become more crucial for foundation assessments, where the testing will reduce uncertainties, and especially load testing will give more information if the availability of hidden safety. More testing will lead to discover that hidden safety, so that higher loads can be accepted. And if there are more loads, that loads can be higher, then instead of one additional layer, maybe two layers are possible. Make it more attractive, give more opportunities for investors to invest in an upgrading of existing structures. So back to the theme of It's Money. It's Money means increased testing saves money. And in the case of the Netherlands and the housing problem, it's not only the money. Increased testing provides cost-effective options for the housing shortage, but also increased testing serves the society. Well, that's my contribution to the It's Money of today. On behalf of my colleague Remco, thank you for your attention. I'm looking forward to your questions, or just send your questions by mail to the email address here. Back to you, Gerald.
Thanks, Marcel. And as chair of the Sustainability Committee within DFI, very interesting presentation also from that point of view. And as a resident of the city of Houston, where we have lots and lots of office buildings that are sitting empty right now, or recent visitor to Washington, D.C., where you can have this kind of topping up, putting additional layers on top of buildings, because there's simply no space. And a lot of inner cities have that same issue. Very interesting presentation.